Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous good-looking friends. Well, Heart of Invictus finally dropped, and I don't think that the stakeholders are pleased with the reception it has received. Let me start off and say that Netflix failed when they decided to choose these two morons to further this one-world agenda we see unfolding right before our eyes. I looked at this series yesterday in its entirety to give it an honest look for itself, putting aside the bias of what I know about Harry and his spiteful wife aside. So I have been reading the reviews as well as the articles that are coming out, and the media is making it sound like Harry made this series and it is all about himself, which, yes, in parts of it, he does talk about his experience and he does talk about his traumas. And yes, he does lie, and that's all true. However, a good portion of the 5-part series is focused on the Invictus Foundation, the athletes that they were following, as well as the games itself. Now, Harry and Meghan popping in and out throughout the series, yes, is understandable, but was it overpowering for this to be all that is being talked about? No. In fact, I think Netflix did a great job at cutting out Meghan as much as possible and limiting her to just these so-called cameo instances, which is kind of funny because remember that woman in Singapore that everybody was talking about, Beth Hurley? Well, she has more of a presence in this documentary series than Meghan does. So we'll get into that in a second. But I just want to put that out there. This was my impression of what I watched, and I didn't get the impression that Harry made this all about himself. In the certain parts that they interviewed him, yes, he talked about himself, his experience, he brought up Diana, but are we surprised? No, because we know that this is the drill for him. Keep in mind that this was filmed and wrapped between 2021 and mid-2022. So anything that came after that we had seen in Spare and all those interviews, as well as the Netflix mockumentary, the backlash and inconsistencies hadn't been known as yet. So for Netflix to then go back and try to re-edit it might have been too late, because at the time when Spare came out, that was in 2023, you would assume that this film had been wrapped and then in the process of being packaged by Netflix. I think it really was too late for them to make any kind of edits. So yes, we see Harry making all these lies, but it's not surprising because his story traditionally tends to gravitate towards fitting certain narratives that they want to push. Overall, my impression after watching these 5 episodes is that this was never about the veterans. In my opinion, this was about supporting this proxy conflict that we have in the Ukraine area. The fact that the media is only talking about the lies Harry told and not the stories of these veterans, I think is the best thing to happen out of this series. In actuality, this was war propaganda. Now, please don't switch off yet. Hear me out. Let me show you what I have found. We all know that the UK and the US have been in tight alignment in supporting this effort by giving away billions of dollars in this effort to protect what they are defining today as so-called democracy against the perceived threat of Putin. We've also seen with our own eyes how Harry and Meghan have weaponized and used the media and to their own sloppiness expose how the media pushes certain narratives and propaganda onto the people in order to influence them and push them into believing certain things. Before Harry and Meghan, I knew nothing about the media and how it worked, and I equally was brainwashed into thinking certain ways and seeing things differently because of how saturated the media is and how biased it is in pushing this kind of propaganda. I think the one positive about Harry and Meghan is that because they abuse their public platform, it's no longer a surprise when they say certain things, and it loses the effectiveness of those who invested in them driving the certain ideologies that they're trying to push, whether it be from this racism angle or whether it be from this war and supporting in the UK reign area. So, how do I know that this series was meant to be seen as political? Well, you just have to look at the people that worked on it and the people that surrounded Harry during this time when he was creating this series. When we look at the two people who are actually behind this production, Joanna Natasagara and Orlando von Eisendale, they run a film company out of the UK called Violet Films. And what is their specialty? Running some of the most impactful film outreach campaigns. And that is a very delicate way of saying pushing propaganda. Look, whether or not you want to acknowledge it, but it's becoming clear and present on a daily basis that perception management has long been a facet of the dominant minority, which is this so-called deep state that does exist. It controls the military, political, financial, and industrial sectors of life in the Western world, and you cannot deny it any further because we are seeing it happen in front of our eyes. Perception management is not only undertaken by political discourse in the political realm, but even more so by the media that is supposed to be tasked with presenting the public with factual information. More and more of us are waking up to the fact that we are being manipulated, especially here in the United States, and that the media is really operating as a propaganda arm for the deep state, which is the current situation that we have going on here. Of that being this proxy conflict in the UK Reign area. What was up front and in front of your face with the Heart of Invictus was the conflict in the UK Reign area. And to me, that signaled, one, that this is about pushing the war efforts that are happening. And while they had other storylines that were going on, there was a core focus specifically on the Ukraine team. And how convenient that this team's country ended up going to war, and the one person that they picked to follow and give a camera to document a lot of this stuff ended up being captured. And then subsequently afterwards, then released by Zelensky, who then went on camera to let the whole world know that this POW now has been freed. And Harry was the one who captured all of that on camera and was able to talk to this woman. I don't know. That seems a little sus, especially since we've seen how manipulative Harry has been, as well as what these leaders have been doing in communicating to the people as to what has been really going on. Quite frankly, I don't personally believe it, but, it is what it is. It's not that I don't believe that what this woman went through didn't really happen. I believe that something happened, but I just find it so coordinated and coincidental that Harry is the one to get to tell the story. We're starting to see the lengths that these kind of corrupt people will go to in order to make people believe a certain narrative. And with billions of dollars on the line, we've seen how certain leaders attack its own people. And for all we know, unbeknownst to this poor woman who was part of this horrific kidnapping, could have been part of a sick propaganda setup by the Ukraine government. The point is that we'll never know because we have been fed so many lies. We don't know what is true. And unfortunately, Harry's not a credible source or the people that Harry is associated with. Look, we have to come to terms with the fact that this is a tangled web and network of NGOs, foundations, corporations, governments that are all together in managing the perception of what people think and see. And these networks exist for the sole purpose of creating a reality in the minds of the general public that, irrespective of the truth, can be used to then control the direction and even the thought processes of the masses. Netflix is a vehicle for that, as well as Disney and other media outlets that have been participating and a part of this shift. Now, I truly believe that the reason why Meghan and Harry are so dumbfounded as to why the public is not receptive to the lies that they have been telling is because they have been a part of this PR manipulation propaganda machine in which they understand the tactics, meaning like you can lie, but if you promote it in such a way that the public doesn't know any better, they're going to believe it and do what you tell them. Of all people to believe this is Harry. He had a front row seat to seeing how PR and the media can be manipulated based off of his own experience as a result of the palace rehabilitating his image. And what we have learned with Meghan Markle coming onto the scene is that the palace will lie for the royals. It's come to light that they did it for Meghan quite a few times. Let's not forget that they lied about Andrew when his scandal broke, as well as they threatened U.S. media outlets to not talk about the story. So when we talk about the PR of the institution, they hold some type of power, in which I think Harry thought by moving to Hollywood he was going to be able to do the same thing, since he's essentially paying for the propaganda to be put out there. What he didn't anticipate was the blowback and people using their critical thinking skills to call out his bullshit on social media. Hence the reason why he hates social media so much and is in favor of pushing this digital online censorship along with the other leaders that hate the fact that people are calling out their lies because they no longer can control their propaganda. Why do you think all these governments that are part of the West are in such a mad push to pass legislation? We just had Canada push their C-11 bill. We now saw the Digital Services Act be pushed in Europe. It is so important that we do not forget that Harry believes 100% in being a part of the ruling class. It is why the U.S. has used him and, in return, have protected him. Harry gives himself away in the heart of Invictus by making the speech about himself and then giving the blessing to these veterans, telling them that they now can move forward because essentially he said so. It is quite condescending because it's like, who are you to tell these veterans who have suffered way more than this guy will ever know to be sanctimoniously telling people that they are worth something or that they can move forward because he is the one who's giving that blessing. It's ridiculous.
You, as a community, have overcome immense challenges, and together you are healing and teaching the world as you go. And you as individuals are people of substance, of resilience, of strength, and of heart.
Strategically, throughout this series, they focus on certain words and tie it to the Ukrainian team. Right here, after the word heart, they have a long pause on the head of the Ukrainian team. They do this throughout the series, but most poignantly at the very end, leaving the last thing you remember is of Ukraine.
Оце, я думаю, є Invictus, непереможний.
And fully knowing that Violet Films participates in these kinds of emotionally charged promotional movies, like this one, the White Helmets, supporting NATO's influence and coalition narrative of demonizing the Syrian government during the time when we had this situation in Syria. Please understand that this film was part of this Syria campaign that was funded by an oil magnate that sought to gain by the fall of the Syrian government. I mean, we're all witnessing how Ukraine is being destroyed, and now we have private companies going in to rebuild the country in the way that they want it, with their central banking system, private corporations going in for development of new cities. It's almost as if it's another land grab. Now, going back to the heart of Invictus, they focused on 6 veteran stories. They had the US, the UK, South Korea, Canada, Denmark, and then there was Ukraine.
This is a question for you. And all these features kind of showing what is going on now.
On the Ukraine team, for what's been weighing on me, certainly for the
And all throughout this entire series, you're just seeing the word Ukraine splashed everywhere. In clear view, you see it in front of you here.
last 24 hours is the reality of their situation, not just them coming here and literally being able to see it in their eyes, the trauma and what they've had to experience with their country being invaded.
As you can see, Beth is just hanging out in the background right there. And she is like that throughout this entire series, which is kind of funny because she gets more FaceTime than Megzy. I don't know, guys. Looks like she is with Harry wherever he goes. Anyhow, back to the subliminal subtle references to Ukraine outside of the story about the Ukraine team. They show a quick clip of this guy standing at the podium speaking about Ukraine from the Ukraine team. Meanwhile, we have Pete Buttigieg sitting in the front row representing the United States from the White House. As you can see there, Beth Hurley's in the background. We also then have brown-noser and suck-up James Holt speaking with the team, talking about Ukraine with Miranda Barbeau sitting right next to him.
Probably the first and only real time that you'll have opportunity to meet some of the Ukrainian team.
With all the craziness that's happening in the world, what's happening in Ukraine, to be here now.
Look, Harry could have said that equally, too, about the Afghanistan team who was there as well. I mean, with all that they went through a few months prior, let's not forget that Harry served in Afghanistan. Before I looked up Violet Films, this felt so in my face. So Vanessa Beeley, who is a well-known UK activist and blogger, writes about the Doc Society and the Threshold Foundation, stating that Joanna Nata-Segara and Orlando Eisendel of Violet Films and Grain Media respectively have collaborated on a number of projects, most notably in 2014 on Virunga, based in the Congo, and then in 2016 when they directed and produced the Netflix White Helmets documentary. In reality, this is what she's saying, they sat on the Turkish side of the border with Syria and had the footage supplied to them by the White Helmets with no verification process to ascertain the authenticity or context of the material they converted into the so-called Oscar-winning promotional feature film. So now when we go back to the heart of Invictus, I don't trust it for 1 second. The intention and motive was not to shine a light on the Invictus Foundation. This was about promoting this Ukraine war. Now, the two questions that immediately came up in my mind was, one, why did Harry choose to work with a film production house who is based in the UK that is specifically focused on these impact campaign films? And then two, the team that was surrounding Harry during the Invictus Games or anything that pertains to veterans, such as Miranda Barbeau. Now, we all remember who Miranda Barbeau is. We all know what her ties are to Obama. So now when you factor that in, as well as the connections and relationships that Prince Harry has, not Meghan, but more so Prince Harry with the White House and his involvement with the censorship industrial complex, as well as the U.S. government protecting Harry's privacy on his visa application, even though he is a publicly professed drug addict, you then start to realize what is really going on here and the purpose that Harry is playing here in the United States. I really do think that there is an agenda that Harry has to accomplish here, which is in line with what our government is doing to its own people. It's also in line with supporting what the king and his family is supporting, which is the WEF, the UN, and the WHO. These three organizations who are not elected by people, but in fact NGOs asserting themselves, dictating what people can say, do, think, feel, have, as well as breathe. These are the people that are deciding who gets to live and who gets to die. It's now difficult for me to think that the monarchy and the way that we see this institution is anything but now just a really big facade. We know that King Charles had been a supporter of these organizations, as well as his family members like Prince Andrew, Beatrice, as well as William and Harry himself. They have been groomed into this Young Global Leaders program. Graduates out of this program, we have dictators like Justin Trudeau, we have Angela Merkel, we have Jacinda Ardern, Macron. All of them have been in favor of taking away people's rights. But we'll save that conversation for another day. In my opinion, it failed to do what the propagandists wanted it to do, which was promote this pro-war and be in support of this whole situation happening over in that area. Whether or not people realize it, but Netflix, Prince Harry, Invictus Foundation, they all exploited these veterans who have legitimately suffered and fought in wars to protect the freedoms that these very same people are trying to take away. And that's what gets me angry. And the fact that the promotion to pull on people's heartstrings with this UK reign situation, conflict, is even more disgusting because this is what this production company, film company, Violet Films, is good at doing. I think the only good thing that came out of this is the overshadowing of the media surrounding making it all about Harry and not actually talking about the messaging that was coming across in this series, which is a good thing because this failed, in my opinion. If this was designed and intended to promote the messaging in support of this proxy war. And since this film company, Violet Films, is so connected into this tangled impact campaign web, don't be surprised if we see it being nominated for some prestigious awards. Like, for example, a BAFTA. Don't be surprised if next year we hear this title come up in its nominees. Anyhow, I'd love to know your thoughts. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I will talk to you later. Bye!
I was such a fraud.